Been doing thinking a bit about spirituality, because that's our this week, and I put a couple of pictures up, but everything's like one, "We Are Not Our Bones," which is on in the big hall, that picture, and I like that. I think I stole the internet. I didn't steal the picture because the picture's from Merrill Park, but I did steal the words, and that's been a good conversation piece at Three Trees, because people kind of go, "Well, what's out?" And then you have a conversation, or they tell you what they think it's, and you have a conversation. And to this idea that we're not just a mess of molecules and gunge and whatever else makes us a human being. And I guess that's part, excuse me, starts, but it's partly what we're trying to work out, isn't it? I suppose as disciples, as followers of Jesus, we're trying to work out, well, what is it about? And also, it's not just that, we make the most of it, aren't we? Because life is good. It has its bad moments and its struggles, but life is good. And other people, most of the time, they're also good. So faith is really about grabbing life, if you do it with both hands. This is a good gift that we have. Looking at the way some people pursue their faith, you think quite the opposite. But actually, Jesus was all about living life. So that's that kind of leads us to our thinking this morning, which is spirituality. I have got some notes. I was just when I said it was all improvised. 50% of it's improvised, and 50% isn't. So you got to work that out. So we are spirit beings. That's a fact, and I think it's a scientific fact. It does, of course, it does depend on how you define spirit, but we're not just our molecules. And those zealot atheists who insist we are just molecules, they're kind of lagging behind really where science is at. So just leave them to it. If you come across a foaming at the mouth atheist type who's really people believe in, just try not to worry about it. Leave them to it. Of course, at the other end of the rabid spectrum, you have those people who think we're just spirit. We just inhabit this body, and if only we could get free of all this yucky stuff, everything would be amazing. Well, that's definitely not science, but it isn't really faith either. It's not the faith that we're of. And I think most people get this. Most people understand that somehow we're not just our bones. We're not just biological means. We're not just that. Because if we were, we are, I'm just an iron, really, or a kettle. It doesn't really have any value. So I think most people understand that we're more than that. So I suppose it's getting to that. Well, if we understand there's more about our universe, it's not just atoms, not just physical laws. Once you get on that, that's kind of where we're at. We're trying to work that out. So what do you do with that? Do you just go, well, that's nice, and carry on? Or do you think it means there's more? There's more to find out. And that's really what church community is about. It's not about being a club of people that you agree with. It's really about joining a movement of people who are trying to find out the truth about God and the truth about life. And we are often put off those people with the louder voices, and depending on your inclination, we either end up in the atheist camp because we're so peed off with the lunatic faith claims, or we end in the religious radical camp because we want to believe so much that we lose our reason. How about, I would like to suggest, how about somewhere in the middle? Obviously not all in the same place, a bit boring and crowded. But don't be put off by those who shout on the streets that you're going to go to hell. We dealt with that the other week. And don't be put off by the angry atheists who end up saying, really, ultimately, nothing matters. Because some things do matter. But enough of that. It's easy to pick arguments with extremists. But how can we, as reasonable people, and we are all reasonable people, Anyway, how can we sense and explore the spiritual aspect of being a human being? Well, you do it with spirituality. So here I would define spirituality as doing things that grow our spiritual side, spiritual exercise, if you like. Just as kind of, I guess, going to lectures, our intellectual health, and going to the gym should improve our physical health. So spirituality should improve our spiritual health. And as we're doing that series on living faithfully and this side of things, our spiritual health is what it means to live faithfully. So what was spirituality for Jesus? Always a good place to start. It's a very short reading today. It's from Mark chapter 1. Mark. So that's out there in the Bible. Mark chapter 1. And it's just a few verses. It's just an example. Otherwise, I'll be reading you hundreds of verses. And I thought I'd just give you the one reading. And you can kind of dig around for the other ones. Can't even find it. Mark chapter 1. It was in here earlier. There we are. So Jesus has just kind of started his ministry here. And he's been doing a few bits and pieces around people, that kind of stuff, you know, making the world a better place. And while it was still night, way before dawn, he got up and went out to a secluded spot and prayed. Simon and those with him went to look for him. They found him and said, "Everybody's looking for you." Jesus said, "Let's go to the rest of the villages so I can preach there also. This is why I've come." He went to the meeting places all through Galilee, preaching and throwing out the demons. For Jesus then, spiritual training was kind of, well, it was things, but it was partly about meeting with his sisters and brothers. It was partly about going to the synagogue. There's other examples in the Gospels where Jesus is teaching at the synagogues. And the synagogues, the closest we've got is, you know, that'd be our equivalent. So go to the churches round and about. Times of prayer together and alone that he had, and also pilgrimage to the temple. There's that story of when Jesus was a child and the whole family go to the temple, if you remember that story. So that was, the temple was the kind of the physical center of the faith, of his faith. So going there was an important kind of marker. So that reading kind of one example of Jesus going off to pray, but he was with other people, and that praying was setting him up for what he was going to do next, which was healing and casting out demons and talking to people and preaching. Now, I don't really like to pull spirituality out of life as though it's something different, because in a sense, everything is spiritual. But on the other hand, if you make something everything, then it's really hard with it, because lots of things are exercise. They walk into the shops, going up the stairs, but we also do exercise as a specific thing in order to focus and to advance. So there are specific things we can do in order to grow spiritually in a spiritual life. So that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to briefly go through it. We'll kind of look at a few things. Well, what can I do to grow that side of my personality and of my heart? What things can I actually do? So today really is a kind of a manual, like how to get spiritually fitter, how to lift big spiritual weights, or how to run further spiritual distances. So we'll start with the obvious one, which is to pray. It's obvious, but it's also one of the hardest, because we forget and we get distracted and we worry about whether we do it right, or we can't have the words, or someone else that we've heard prays better than us. So I don't really want to say anything, and I don't know what to say. I've got nothing to say. I'm too upset, or I just can't really concentrate, and my mind's going, and I've got things I've got to do. So we have trouble praying, don't we? Or is that just me? Prayer is simply a conversation with God. It's talking and it's listening. That's a proper conversation. And for us, most of us, it does take practice, because prayer kind of is a foreign language. But We pray as we talk, as we walk down the street, talking to God about anything and about nothing. We can pray when we stop and are just still a moment and pour out our hearts. We can pray when we've actually just run out of things to say. Prayer is that connection with God. It's like when you sit with a close friend, and it doesn't matter really if you say anything or not. It's communion with God. Just as you do have a close friend, sometimes you're out and about with them, or you go around them and you haven't really got anything to say, but you just be in there. That's prayer. See, we've been practicing midday prayers as a church family, haven't we? And it's been an experience, and for me it's been a real discipline. And I'll be watching myself as the world turns back to what the new normal will be. I found already, or at the moment, it's made a difference to me. I find myself a bit freer and a bit more, I suppose. So therefore, weirdly, and this goes against my instinct, the formal structured prayer time actually has brought more freedom to my my spiritual life generally, which is interesting. But I guess it's like exercising. If you've broken an arm, you have to do formal exercise, and then it's all right. It's easier to use it the rest of the time. So perhaps that's kind of exercising those spiritual muscles to get yourself going. Another thing with prayer, I think a lot of people find, I don't, because I'm gobby really, is people struggle with the words. But you can find lots of written words, and the Psalms in the middle of the Bible are great because you've got the whole range of emotion experience there, from the highest joys to the deepest sorrows. So borrow other people's words. If you find it hard to find the words to say, I've got some examples. I mean, there's lots of books out there. I mean, there's a couple here, which are kind of everything from kind of poemy type books to kind of more prayers. And we use quite a few things from the kind of Celtic tradition in our church, different prayer times. So don't think it's somehow less to pray so much prayer because they will become yours. But pray. Talk. Another thing to do, and in spirituality, but people don't really think it is, to learn and to grow. And this will vary from one person to the next. For some people, it will mean study. Study isn't all bad because there's no exam at the end of this study. But if you study, always start with Jesus. The Old Testament's nice, admittedly. It's a bit odd at times. The letters in the New Testament are also good. But they often need a bit of context. So get to know Jesus. If you get to know Jesus, then the rest on each side of that starts to make a bit more sense. Start with just the Old Testament view of God, and some people read, well, that's how God wants us to behave. These are God's rules, how God thinks the state should work, blah, blah, blah. If that's your starting point, it's a very different view if you start with Jesus and then you look through the lens of Jesus at the Old Testament. You end up, it really isn't very Christian. And if you just start with the teachings of Paul, which there are traditions within the church, they're kind of main things, or the teachings of Paul. And Paul came from that very legalistic background of rules and systems and rituals. But if you don't read them in the light of Jesus, you have something that's like, you mustn't do this and you mustn't do that, and here's a list of things that I don't approve of. And those things, it's fine to through that and to examine them, but you need to read them in the light of Jesus. That's how Paul was working as well. So do study, but start and to study in the person of Jesus. So get to know Jesus, because that helps us with our spiritual life, helps us discern what's going on, and gets us used to the idea of saying, how does this look in the light of Jesus, whatever I'm reading or doing? The best way to study Jesus is to read the Gospels. And start with Mark or Luke. See what he like, how he treated people, the things he said, what he said important, not what you think's important or what what says is important, or the church says is important. What does Jesus say is important? Because it's quite different to what the traditional and the established church have very often preached. And use a translation that works for you, that speaks your language. I like the Message. Not that helps showing you that, because it's very natural. I mean, it's got a few isms in it, but it's got a great approach, I think. And as a church, we tend to Good News translation again, which is in a kind of contemporary language. But do whatever works, because if you're reading a Bible that doesn't make any sense, or odd words, or is very strange, you're not going to be encouraged to go back to it. It should be a book you're reading, and you want to read, and you want to get back to. So keep reading, and if that's your thing, and there are lots of resources out there, from devotional books like these sorts of things to novels, and I've drawn inspiration from all these kind of things, study guides and books. They've taught me, they've made me think, they've drawn me into the mystical. But if you don't look, how will you know? Do explore that. Do explore that. There's a book like this, which is fairly simple. A few people in the church have read that one, which is look at different approaches to spirituality. So it kind of tells you about other approaches that you can then try out. So there's things you can do. It doesn't have to be a massive, dusty old textbook that you read. I'd say don't read them. They're normally a bit. But reading isn't good for everyone. If you're not, reading isn't your thing, right? Lots of things that aren't reading that still have books. So I've just finished reading this, which is some of the great stories from the Old Testament, and I love this. Really, really well done. So if you're not big on lots of sort of stuff, try stuff like that. And this kids stuff, there's all kind of murders and massacres, other stuff going on in there. Testament stuff. It doesn't have to be a textbook. So if you want to read the Bible and you think, well, actually, I find it really hard, all those words and that stuff going on, try something like this. It's good. Or even, we'll come back to that. Another thing is books like this that aren't particularly Christian, and they're actually, these are kind of more, I would say, you use these devotionally to draw you in. And this is just a book of loads of pictures of angels type stuff. So in it as a guide, I guess it's kind of in this edition of an icon. There's things like this that actually I'm not a book person, but there are books that will help you. And this, which I still haven't quite got the hang of, but this is another reflective book. It's very visual, and it's got little bits of words in it in there. And again, you just pick it up. So you don't need to read big, boring textbooks in order to go. So yeah, explore. It's like going to when you get something, going to the DIY shop and having a look. Well, what are there that will help me do this job? And it's like this. I'm going to ask you at the end for years. The other thing is things like films. This is a version. I mean, people tell me that the price is good. I haven't watched it. It seems a bit too for me. But use these things to get you thinking. It doesn't have to be a book. So films, and also on lots of good stuff online, lectures and films. And there's also some terrible ones as well. But find teachers that other people have found helpful. Ask around, and there's resources that aren't wordy. I mean, and it sounds a bit obvious. Sunday mornings, church with an amazing preacher, and if you go there and hear this preacher, you'll learn so much. You will grow in your faith. You'll become like a Uber disciple. I'm going to tell you where that church is, because we won't just keep coming here. But find somewhere where you can grow. So stretch yourself, but do be discerning, because despite the really good out there, there's also some awful stuff. Look at the person who's speaking. Check them out. If someone has a massive mansion and hates gay people, well, they'll have a particular understanding of God, won't they? So use your instinct and your knowledge to ask yourself, is this someone who lacks the grace and the love of Jesus? And if it is, well, listen to her. Also remember, you don't have to agree with them. It's your path you're walking. So anyway, learn and grow. Okay, learn and grow. The other thing that I'm going to mention briefly is retreat. The thing we had of Jesus, he was on retreat. And Jesus did it sometimes alone. He would go off on his own. Sometimes he'd go off with his friends. And people find this because retreat gives you perspective. It takes you out of the situation so you can think more clearly. All the noises, the normal noises are gone. And this is the idea of pilgrimage, really, to get away from the usual, to seek the spiritual. And it doesn't have to be a major epic that takes weeks. Jesus did both. Time in the wilderness, 40 days and 40 nights, that kind of epic retreat for Jesus. Sometimes he just nipped off for a few hours to recharge. So a retreat is a bit like a camp, but not quite as sweaty, I would hope. Gives you a focused and a good time with God. So give it a go. I mean, now's a good time for that sort of thing. You can go on a retreat. You could say if you're on your own in the house, it's possibly easy to retreat. But if you're sharing a house, you say, well, today I just want a bit of quiet, and just use the time. Yeah. Anyway, spirituality. There are things like fasting, isn't there? And the days of prayer, which we've done. There's lots of things you can do. I mean, that book there's got more. But I guess they're the key ones. Conversation going with God. Make sure you grow. Have you read or watched or listened to something recently that kind of made you think? Keep growing. Honest, right? That's about it. People will act as though it's a great mystery and it's very difficult, and you've got to books and you've got to buy CDs and you've got to subscribe to these things and you've got to go to conferences. And whilst that may help, you don't actually need it. It's like gym. You don't need to join a gym to get fit. It may help you motivate, but you don't need it. And perhaps that is part of the problem, that in a sense we know how hard it is to be a disciple, but perhaps part of the difficulty is it's so easy because our faith is down to earth, it's real. Perhaps for some people it really appeal. It's not all dressed in history and ritual and dry ice and candles and stuff like that. It's just God and you side by side in the real world. And maybe that's not what everyone wants. But that's why our faith isn't an escape from reality. Our faith is about living in this reality and knowing the truth of a deeper reality that's going on around. So I would encourage you to find where you are. Not just God to be in a big church or a big meeting or this mystical manufactured experience. Find God where you are. Pray, learn and grow, and use your life, your senses to seek God, because that's what connecting with God is about. And this uses head and heart. So make the most of reading, make the most of music, conversations and actions, what you do. How is this reflecting God? How's God speaking to me in what I'm doing? Find God in the acts of generosity you do. And also find God in the acts of generosity that are done for you. Train yourself to seek God out in every situation and every place and every time. And you develop the skill, I think, fundamentally, by developing other things. So that's it. Secret. There's no equipment required, which means you can just do it. It's not difficult. You can start now. And you know, there's one thing I would add actually, as a tool in our spiritual tools, and that is just together. Us. Eating, talking, just in about, whatever it is. The more together, the more we grow as disciples. It wasn't an accident that Jesus had this group of friends around him. And it's not an accident that Christians go off on their own, they have a fallout or whatever, they think they know better than other people. It's not an accident that people that way, that lone Christians often go off this weird tangent. Spirituality is a shared thing. It's a communal thing. So let's keep talking and praying and walking together. So get on with it. Go deeper with God. And let's grow together. Amen.
Such a visit from the one I thought I'd never meet. Oh, beyond my greatest expectations, you exceeded everything. Well, here I transparent in the light of you. And look inside, see that fire burning bright, the same one that you rekindled inside me. My mouth was dry. I was, oh, ain't the same man I used to be. But do you still like what you see in me? Still see through, oh, always will be with you. But can you stand to see my guitar and you? Nowhere to run, been out here too long under the sun. Am I too afraid to get some? Myself some shade.